are joining me on the most gorgeous late Saturday afternoon here in central Ohio. It is now breezy, but earlier it was super hot. We just had the summer solstice, very excited about that. So my name is Emily and I live on just a little bit over 2.5 acres of land here with my husband Tim and our 3 adorable dogs. We currently have a little kitchen garden in the back corner, and then beside it is a greenhouse. That kitchen garden at the moment is completely vulnerable to all wildlife, so deer come through regularly and just wipe everything out. Because of that, the garden is not super productive and I feel pretty limited in what I can grow there. I mostly just have perennial herbs, and then we have some netted beds as well for things that are vulnerable to birds, squirrels, deer, etc. We even have turkey that come through here. Right now, we are trying to actually install a large critter fence in the back area of the property, and we are currently working on putting up some beds there, and the goal there is just to have an area that's protected from the wildlife, and that way I can actually start to grow things like beans or more greens and not have to deal with tons of the netting and kind of worrying every second of the day running out to the garden to see if I have to scare away deer. Another thing that I really love to grow here on the property are roses. So I'm a pretty new rose gardener and new to kind of flower gardening in general. The roses have been a little bit of a challenge because here on the property, unfortunately, we do have rose rosette disease. I am still learning about that disease. We do have wild multiflora rose here on the property, and my understanding is typically that can contribute. So unfortunately, I have lost about 5 of the newer roses that were planted in the front to rose rosette. I'm watching my other roses like a hawk. Not that there's anything I can do if they get infected, but I'm just really hoping that that disease stays isolated to the front, because the majority of my roses are currently planted in the backyard. And I'm actually, you can't see it, but I'm seated next to one of my roses here in a pot. I have about 5 pots here on the deck with roses. I've really fallen in love with the David Austin roses. They are absolutely gorgeous and special and just unlike a lot of the roses I've seen growing up here in the US. So I'm a little bit of a David Austin rose addict. And I want to say I have at least 30 planted on the property, or did before I lost several to rose rosette. So yeah, the goal really of this channel is just to share my gardening journey with you, and along the way we'll do some fun things like maybe a little wholesome baking or flower arranging, things of that nature. I'm excited to take you along on this journey, and I hope you enjoy the content as much as I enjoy filming it and working on this amazing garden. All right, so one of the things that I really wanted to do this past weekend was to bake a cake, specifically a mini cake, kind of in a rustic style, and decorated with some of the roses and flowers from my garden. So I decided to do a rose and lemon flavored cake. I'm a chocolate addict, so it's a little strange for me not to be baking a chocolate cake, but I wanted to try something different. So here I've prepped all my dry ingredients, and I'm now starting to gather my wet ingredients, and I'm using this little oat milk maker here. Really, you can use it to make any sort of nut or seed milk, but I primarily use it to make oat milk. And so you just add oats and some water and it's good to go. This is my absolute favorite olive oil of all time. It is from the Fresh Pressed Olive Oil Club, and it is a quarterly subscription service. I also really like using this vanilla bean paste. It's definitely pricey, but it has a phenomenal flavor and texture to it. So I'm going to really embarrass myself here and admit that while I was grating this lemon, the lemon managed to completely slip out of my hand and into the bowl. Yep. Using a little bit of rose water here from the same brand as the vanilla paste. All right, so now it's time to mix everything up. This is where I definitely started to notice that the batter was a little bit more thick than it should be. The recipe specifically says that the batter should be thin, as most cake batters that I've made before are. However, as you can see in the clip, the batter was just extremely, extremely thick and creamy, which it looks great, but not quite the texture I was expecting. So the next step was to take these cute little cake pans and grease them up with the shortening and then line them with a little bit of parchment paper so that the cake batter didn't stick to the bottom. So as you can see here, the batter consistency doesn't look quite right, but at this point we're committed and we're going to push ahead. And now they're finally ready to bake. All right, so here I'm getting started on preparing the frosting. I'm loading up some shortening into a measuring cup and dumping it in a big bowl, adding some confectioner's sugar. Also adding in a little bit of fresh lemon for that lemon flavor. Grating up some more lemon. Happy to report this one didn't actually fall in the bowl. And adding some vanilla flavoring as well. All right, so now my frosting is prepped and my cakes are in the oven. And I wanted to go ahead and go outside to the kitchen garden and harvest some blooms to decorate my cake with. I've got a really young lavender plant here growing in my garden that's flowering. So I decided to harvest a couple of stems. And not pictured here, I harvested a couple of rose blooms as well from the roses potted on my deck. Also harvesting a little bit of geranium here. And now we're all set to assemble, frost, and decorate. So here's the frosted cake. You could probably tell from the clips that I was struggling a little bit to frost it. Really happy that I went for more of a rustic styled cake. I think its quirkiness adds to its charm. So for the final step, I'm just decorating the cake with the blooms that I harvested from my garden. Starting out with the David Austin roses, and this is the variety called Emily Bronte. It is absolutely gorgeous. And now I'm just adding this very delicate purple geranium flower. Last addition are the beautifully fragrant stems of lavender. Alright, so next I'm going to share with you some really beautiful footage that I captured on our trip to Cape Natick, Maine. We were fortunate enough to stay at the Cliffhouse Maine Hotel. That was our first time there, and it was a beautiful and special experience. We stayed in an oceanfront room, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the weather while we were there was a bit dark and stormy. The hotel staff actually shared with us that typically the waves aren't as active as you see them here. The waves were tumbling and crashing all day and all night while we stayed there, which I really enjoyed. One really unique feature of this hotel was this adorable beverage station that was right outside of our room in the hallway. My favorite activity during the trip was definitely our spa stay. It is absolutely gorgeous and serene. I was also really impressed by the product selection available to purchase at the spa. I discovered a couple of new brands that I am completely obsessed with. The first is called Zents, and they have the most gorgeously fragranced line of soaps, bath bombs, body oils, perfume, all sorts of lovely products. So now I'm taking you with me on a quick tour of my garden to show you what's in bloom. This is the very elegant David Austin Harlow Carr rose. This is a newer rose addition to my garden. I believe this is the Elizabeth Rose by David Austin. Had to include a clip of my Corgi Rex. Currently ripening right now in my garden are some tomatoes and strawberries. These peonies have now gone over since filming this, but this is the gorgeous Sarah Bernhardt peony. And here we have some Nepeta. I love having salvia in my garden as well. This is another close-up of the David Austin Harlow Carr. This is the David Austin Olivia Rose Austin shrub in my front yard. This rose is definitely a little bit outside the norm of what I normally choose from a color palette perspective. It is this gorgeous apricot-y orange yellow. It is the Lark Ascending from David Austin. All right, so now I'm taking you along to plant 2 of my newest David Austin roses. I don't know if it's visible on camera, but please excuse the giant bruise on the back of my knee. I have very lax joints and I managed to recently dislocate my knee. So I am going to plant both of these roses in the back critter fenced in area to protect them from wildlife. And just to give you an idea of our soil type here in Ohio, we have very dense clay soil. This time of year, it is still doable to dig. However, as we proceed into the warmer summer months, it will literally feel like it turns to concrete and be very difficult to dig, especially if it hasn't rained recently. So unfortunately, my camera battery did not last long enough to capture filming planting both roses. The rose that I captured footage of that I am showing here is the Nye Bevan, which is a shrub rose, and I believe she grows to be about 3.5 feet wide by 3.5 feet tall. And here she is, all planted up in her new home. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, take care.